Thank you, Melinda, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. I brought my laptop with me just in case I need to refer to my notes. So, I am the new area Citrus IPM advisor for UCANR, and I'm stationed up at Twin Cove, so drop by any time to say hello. I would love to hear about your experiences and talk to you about what your needs are, okay? Little bit about me before I jump into citrus pest and get carried over by that. I was born and raised in Nepal, and I got my BS in agriculture from Tribhuvan University in Nepal. And I came to the United States in 2009, went to Oklahoma State University and got my master's and Ph.D. in entomology. My research program for my graduate studies focused on developing integrated pest management for insects that are problem in storage systems, like in grain storage, dried fruit nut storage systems. And then after my PhD, I did 2 years of postdoc research working on phosphine resistance management, which is a fumigant heavily used in safeguarding pests, for pest control in storage systems, and now also in citrus. Then in 2016, I joined Beth Crafton-Carville's group at Kearney as assistant research entomologist, and I worked with Beth for 5 years, especially focusing on developing post-harvest treatment strategies for those insects and mites that are export concern to our citrus growers in California. And 3 months ago, I joined UCANR as area Citrus IPM advisor, and you're right, Melinda, my introduction is a page long. The title of the job is a page long. And here my responsibility is to conduct research to address the needs, the problems that you have in pest management, conduct research to fill in the gaps and communicate that information back to you so that you can make informed pest management decisions. So we have more than 75% of the citrus that grows here in the valley. Wow, I can't really read the slides up there. So the varieties that are popular in the valley are Naples and Valencias, but that trend is changing as old Valencia orchards are being replaced by mandarins, and our mandarin acreage is increasing. In the coastal region, we have lemons, and we have Naples and Valencias in the southern interior region, and in desert we have grapefruit and lemons. And throughout California, as you are well aware, weather conditions are very different, and what that does is our pest problems are not the same in these different citrus growing regions because of different weather conditions. For example, coastal regions has much milder climate compared to hot and dry climate here in the valley, which is great for pests like citrus thrips and bradyskill in the valley. Some varieties can be susceptible to some specific pests, and we have insects like ACP, which are now established in the southern California and are a #1 variety. ACP is still under current area-wide eradicated management program and not established in the valley. So here in the valley, our pest concerns are slightly different than in Southern California. And because our pest varieties are different, that dictates our Citrus IPM, and that too is constantly evolving and changing. It doesn't stay the same. It sits along with the factors that influence the IPM. And some of the factors that influence Citrus IPM are insecticide resistance. When you're using product frequently to control a pest, what that does is it puts selection pressure on the pest, and they develop resistance. And if you continue to use that product over and over, you are controlling fewer and fewer pests with time until that product no longer works, and we lose a product. And that influences citrus IPM, because if you're not controlling your pest and seeing resurgence, then our growers are having to apply multiple times to control the same pests. Like what is happening with citrus thrips in the valley. Our citrus thrips populations are developing resistance to delegate, and because of that, delegate application doesn't usually control citrus thrips, and they rebound pretty quickly in a matter of a week, within weeks sometimes, and our growers are having to apply again and again to control citrus thrips. Another factor that influences citrus IPM is type of pests and natural enemies, and also, this ties in together with weather conditions, what kinds of pests you have, and how the weather is affecting it. Like I said, in Southern California, ACP is established, and that takes precedence over all other pests. But prior to ACP, in Southern California, the traditional pests like citrus thrips and California red scale, which are bad in the valley, which are our #1 problem in the valley, are not that big of a deal because of citrus varieties. Thrips don't usually cause that big of a damage in lemons, and also because natural enemies are present year-round because of the mild climate in Southern California compared to here in the valley. Hot and dry climates don't support the natural enemies, but it's excellent for the pest because they like stressed trees. They thrive better on trees that are water stressed or heat stressed. And another great example that influences citrus IPM is presence or incoming invasive species. ACP is a great example. Before ACP got established in Southern California, citrus IPM in Southern California was mostly biological control based, and after the ACP established, now we see the shift towards pesticide management, pesticide dependent citrus IPM. So it's constantly changing, and it gives us the opportunity to do research and generate more information to help you. Now, on to the key citrus pests in the San Joaquin Valley. There are several insects and mites that are a problem in the San Joaquin Valley. Although these pests could be present year-round, they are only damaging during a certain part of the year. So, the first one, citrus red mite, starts showing up in February. So that's when we should start monitoring for this pest. And if you reach a threshold, make a treatment decision before the pest gets damaging to the damaging stage. And for this specific pest, once it starts getting hot, they don't like the heat and they disappear. So if you are sampling late in May and see red mites that is near threshold or at the threshold, you probably can choose not to do anything because the summer heat is going to kill them anyway. Another important pest is citrus thrips that are present year-round but are very damaging to that young fruit when that fruit is starting to develop after petal fall. So we recommend that you start sampling right at the petal fall and go very frequently, like twice a week, because citrus thrips develop very fast. And if you reach some kind of threshold, and that is different for citrus thrips depending on when you're sampling, what stage of the growth your fruit is. The threshold can be different, but if you see thrips, first and second in stars, early in the season, you need to do an insecticide application because that's going to cause some damage. Some other pests or katydids that are present from May to August. Also, young fruit is more susceptible. Once the fruit size gets bigger, they move away to different things, I guess. Scale insects like Citrus scale and California red scale are more present throughout the year and can be damaging throughout the year. But we recommend that you start monitoring when the pest cycles begin sometime early summer and make treatment decisions to target that first, or second, or third generation before the populations get out of hand. Because if there are lots of insects, pests, any kind of insect pest, no treatment is going to kill them all. It's all numbers game. You gotta think that you gotta think and act before the numbers get out of hand, because it's all about person gets killed. So moving on, we recently had a field event at Lane Cove, and we asked growers and PCs, 42 of the participants who were mostly growers and PCs, about what the challenges were and what they were doing about it. And I'm going to share some of the responses from that meeting. When asked what is the most challenging pest for you in 2021, 47% of our growers said citrus thrips, and 30% of our growers said California red scale. Less than 10% of the growers said mites and citricola scale with concerning to them, and about 2% of the participants said citricola scale, leaf miner, Asian citrus psyllid, and katydid are concerned. What I don't have in there, it only allows me to put 10 options for answers. What I don't have in there is mealybugs, and we have been hearing a lot about mealybug incidences, especially in the Cooperative area. So that looks like one of the pests that is becoming concerning to our growers. So just following up on that, then this is now on citrus thrips. We asked what were the average number of sprays that they were applying to mature orchards in 2021 to control citrus thrips. And 60% of our growers said they were doing 2 to 3 applications. More than 34% said more than 3, and some growers applied up to 5 times. Now what I want to mention here is that thrips management window. Thrips are damaging to young fruit. Once the fruit gets above 1.5 inch diameter, thrips do not usually cause damage, and all that information is based on work with oranges. We're still, figuring out what that means for mandarins, but for oranges, that treatment window is about 8 to 10 weeks after petal fall until the fruit size is reached about 1.5 inch diameter. So here, some growers were applying, spraying for citrus thrips up to 5 times within that 8 to 10 weeks window, and that's a lot of application. That's telling us citrus thrips are getting out of hand, and we need to do something about it. Okay, then the next question we asked was, what were the insecticides they were applying to control citrus thrips? And very surprisingly, 33% of them said they were applying Cargil. Cargil is a carbamide insecticide, and it has been shown that they already developed citrus thrips already developed resistance to Cargil back in 1990s. And the thing with resistance is it doesn't disappear, it gets diluted over time when you're not putting that selection pressure. So if you're not using Cargil for the last 10-15 years, you probably have citrus thrips populations that are somewhat a mix of resistance and susceptible population. But if you go back to using Cargil, we're going to be selecting for resistance again, and that presents a problem. It's a short-term fix, not an option, is what I wanted to say. Other popular choices were Agrimate, Delegate, or Success, and Exudor and Minectopro, which seem to work pretty good based on the trials that Beth had done in the last several years. So then, after all that insecticide application, we asked, did he get good thrips control this year? And 47% of them said no, or they don't know. So that's kind of saying that again, going back to citrus thrips are getting hard to control. So let's talk a little bit about why is citrus thrips problem increasing and what can we do about it. There are several factors that might be contributing to high thrips pressure in recent years. One of which is dry winter. Citrus thrips pupate in soil. About 2/3 of them pupate in soil. And when it's cool, wet winter, the microbes in soil help control some portion of that citrus thrips population. That doesn't happen in dry winters, and we're seeing high survival of citrus thrips pupating in soil. What that means is we have higher numbers of pest pressure, high pest pressure to begin with. And another factor is heat. What does heat mean? High heat or long periods of warm winter or high heat during the summer means fast development of insects, because insects develop based on temperature, based on accumulation of degree days. And usually citrus thrips have 7 to 8 generations per year, but if you have the right temperature, right accumulation of degree days, they can have 12 generations per year. And that's again, high numbers, difficult to control. Another factor that might be contributing heavily towards increasing citrus thrips problem is insecticide resistance. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about resistance later, but we're seeing that citrus thrips are increasingly more and more resistant to delegate in success. And what that does is it forces growers to apply more, and then again, that's a cycle creating more selection pressure, selecting for resistance. Another issue could be coverage. Many pesticide needs contact with the pest to work, and the nature of citrus thrips is they like hiding under tight spaces, so if it's not touching the bug, it's not killing the bug. Okay? So what do? We can incorporate pest biology in making pest management decisions, target the most susceptible states, time your pesticide applications when you're getting the highest kill, target lower numbers in earlier in the season when you know that the pressure is not that high, and use pesticides only when necessary, because frequent use of pesticide is what causes resistance. A little bit more about citrus thrips. Citrus thrips are phagotactic, meaning that they like to crowd under tight spaces. They like to stay there, like under the sepals of the young fruit. And they have this unique mouth part that their mandibles are fused together to make this spear, that the black and white picture that you see on the slide. They use that spear-like mandible to puncture the epidermal cells, and they drink up the fluid with their straw-like stylus. And they go on and on, stabbing more and more cells. And as the fruit grows, the damaged tissue moves outward, and that's what gives us this ring scar around on the basal end of the fruit. The most important generations are the second and third generation, which is right around the petal fall, which happens right around the petal fall until the fruit is about 1.5 inches in diameter. Again, this is data based on work that was done with oranges. It might be different for mandarins, and that's something we'll be looking at in coming years. And Jay Rosenhan from UC Davis is already working towards understanding how far into the citrus fruit growth stages can thrips cause scarring damage for different citrus varieties, and we hope that he finishes the study and shares some interesting results with us. Okay, I said we need to incorporate insect biology into our pest management decisions, and it's really important to understand how they develop when the generations start coming, and which is the most opportune time to get the maximum kill so that we're minimizing the damage caused by thrips on our fruits. They start coming out, the thrips start coming out sometime in March when the temperatures start warming up. They overwinter as eggs, and when the temperature starts warming up, they hatch and then they start feeding quickly. The first and second instars are the most damaging. They have bigger mouthparts, and they quickly complete their development, and we have second generation within a matter of less than 2 weeks. And when the second generation shows up is the time around petal fall when our fruit starts developing. And that is the most damaging life stage, most susceptible life stage of the fruit. And when you have citrus thrips, first and second instar, which are the most damaging life stage, combined together with that most susceptible fruit, that's when you get most damage. That's when we should be targeting our insecticide application to control second and third generation. And we tell our growers not to worry about citrus thrips feeding on leaves. Trees can tolerate leaf feeding, but it's the young fruit that we need to protect, and that's what we focus on, is protecting the young fruit. And here is the photographic guide to scarring damage. The first two are slight scarring. When the fruit develops, you probably won't see much of that, and it probably won't be downgraded in the packing house. But the severe scarring, the ones you see on the right, those ring scarring, those will be there when the fruit matures, and that fruit gets downgraded in the packing house. And that's what makes you less money if you allow this to happen. So it's important to control citrus thrips before the severe scarring stage. Okay, we have a lot of choices when it comes to pesticides for controlling citrus thrips. I took this list from UCIPM management guidelines. We have selective materials, which are Intrust, Delegate, Agrimake, Movento, Exirel, Minoctopro, and Veratran. And we have some broad spectrum insecticides such as Carzo, Dimethoid, Baythroid, and Danitol. The selective products were working very well. Selective products like Delegate and Success were working very well until they were not, because now we have resistant population and we're going back to using broad spectrum insecticides. And like I said earlier, it's probably going to bring down the population for this year, next year, until we start again seeing the resistant population emerge, and it will get harder to control them even with Carzo. And Carzo is a broad spectrum insecticide. It's going to affect the predator mites, which contributes some towards citrus thrips control. So I want to talk more about resistance, because this seems like an issue we can do something about. Citrus thrip resistance to Delegate is increasing in the valley population. This year we tested 13 populations, and none of the 13 populations were susceptible to Delegate. They even survived 10 times the discriminating dose, which is 1 parts per million. When exposed to this Munger cell biopsy, where thrips are there for 48 hours, we saw good survivors there. And these thrips probably are not being controlled by the field application rate, which is about 40 ppm for Delegate. And our growers seem to know that they have resistant thrips in their orchards. 50%, 58% of them said that they have Delegate resistance, and 3% said they don't have Delegate resistance, and 39% said they didn't know. But thrips can move considerable distance. If your neighbor has resistant populations, you probably have resistant populations in your orchard too. So what our research combined with some of the work that Beth was doing earlier, screening populations since 2017, has shown us that we're killing fewer and fewer thrips with delegate every year because it just keeps increasing, and we're starting to see survival at higher concentrations. That means that our field applications are probably not controlling citrus thrips. Field applications of delegate. So, to summarize, some take-home messages for citrus thrips management: time your insecticide application, hit the life stage that's most sensitive and its then starts. Target second and third generation because they are the most damaging life stage to the young fruit, generations to the young fruit before they can cause severe damage to the fruit. And that wasn't supposed to be applied frequently. Apply insecticides only when needed, not frequently. I missed out a not there. Don't apply frequently, apply insecticides only when needed. Rotate the insecticides group. We have a good list of chemicals with different modes of action. So rotate different modes of action. If you chose to apply Agrimate, then second application could be Minectopro, or third application could be Delegate if you don't have resistant population. So choose your insecticides wisely based on their mode of action. That needs to be one of the considerations. And aim for good coverage. We always advocate for that. Use around more than 500 GPA. I know water is an issue, but we need to get the product to the pest and drive slowly, around less than 2 miles per hour. If you can, drive at 1.5 miles per hour. And if and when you can, avoid broad spectrum insecticides like Carzol that affect predatory mites. But if you have to do it, go ahead and, I guess it's important to control citrus thrips, right? So moving on now to another pest. Again, I'm going back to these poll questions. 30% of our growers said that California red scale was the second important challenging pest for them in the valley. And we have had this for the last 10 years, I guess. There are several factors, again, that are causing explosion of California red scale since 2012, which I have listed here. Again, similar to citrus thrips, warm winter, drought, they just like that kind of environment better. Warm winter means that we are killing less population with winter temperatures. So we have more population surviving. Again, high pressure to begin with. Drought, they like water-stressed trees, and the dusty stressed trees have more scales, but parasites don't like to go to them. So we're not getting the natural enemy control as effectively as we would if there was no drought and dust and all this smoke, I guess. Heat is another factor, very important factor, because that means our scales are developing much faster. On an average year with average temperatures, the scales usually have 4 generations. But we're accumulating more and more degree days in the last 12 years. This graph over here shows accumulation of degree days on the y-axis and time on the x-axis, and that little boxes is first generation of when we start seeing first generation of prowlers, second generation of prowlers, third generation of prowlers, fourth generation. Usually should stop there. Spain has 3.5 generations. We would love to work with that kind of population. But here, especially then a virus only attacks females, and you might be seeing more number of traps, but then that's not relevant to what your pest population is in the field. So just wanted to bring that up. During the season, look for where the scale is, sample is, because that's where they usually start, and interview on top of the tree to see where the scales are present. It's hard to tell if the scale is live or dead. You can't tell for sure unless you flip them over, but a very good way is to rub your thumb on the scale. If it's dead, it will flick off. If it's live, it won't. That's one way of telling if you have live scale populations in the field. And when you apply the treatment, evaluate dead, healthy, or parasitized scales to see how effectively your treatment controls them. And for planning for the next season, like right around now, again, a model based on oranges says if you're catching more than 1,000 males on the 4th flight, now we see 5th flight, so maybe we need to change that. Then you might need a treatment in the next season. So if you're seeing 1,000 males in the 4th flight, which happened sometime late in August, you might need to go back to your orchard and sample again, and again for the males, put out traps and sample and make the treatment decision. You can also plan for the next season by estimating percentage fruit with more than 10 scales. We aim for less than 1%, but if you have more than 5% of fruit infested with 10 scales, then you'll have red scale populations in that block, and you need to apply treatments. We have a lot of choices again for California red scale management too. This is a table I borrowed from Dr. Grafton Cowell. We have 7, which is a carbaryl insecticides, has moderate efficacy because it has resistant issues. It's toxic to most natural enemies, and broad spectrum because it is, toxic to natural enemies. Steam and center are insect growth regulators. They affect insects differently. What they do is they affect the molting stages. They keep the insects in their as instars, prevent molting, and that's how that insecticide works. We are starting to see some resistant issues in steam, and both of these insect growth regulators are toxic to beetles. Have a narrow range, it only works on California red scale. Movento is a very effective insecticide, but it doesn't control scale on wood. And what that means is you have a reservoir population living inside, in the inside canopy of the tree on wood, and that just serves as, reservoir for the next year. Oils do work, but they have short residual. And Aphides is a biocontrol method. It's moderately effective. We recommend that you use Aphides and avoid using broad spectrum insecticides, so you're allowing Aphides to work. Okay. Now, how do we use the life scale of California red scale for making pest management decisions, selecting which compound to use? If you're applying 7, it's usually most effective on crawlers and fuzz caps, crawlers and white caps. So that's when you'll be getting the highest kill. Steam and centaur, which are the second ones, they're on the list. I can't use pointer on all my, okay, maybe there. Steam and centaur are insect growth regulators, and they affect molting stages. So apply before you start seeing crawlers. So trap the male flight and make it based on degree day calculation. Apply when you have crawlers or at the white cap stage, so they have their chance to do the job. These insect growth regulators affect males more because males have more molting stages compared to females. If you're releasing a Phytis, target the third instar females because that's what they like laying their eggs on. And Movento acts on all life stages, but it's mostly effective on, again, the most susceptible ones are crowlers and whitecaps. But Movento only works on fruit, not on wood. The next one is a pheromone disruption. This is, I'm sharing some of this data that was master's thesis work of Mr. Joel Leonard, which I think is recently published. They tested mating disruptions at the rate of 180 dispensers per acre in 2 orchards in 2016-17 when they hang these dispensers after the first male flight, and in 2018 before the first male flight. Again, that was before. And what we found is in 2016-17, when the traps were put after the first male flight, they saw considerable number of scales on the traps. These numbers on the y-axis, I don't know if you can see well, are in thousands, 10,000s, 20,000s, where these are, I think, 1-2,000. So they got considerable control in male flight by using the pheromone dispenser. And the bar chart is showing the percentage of fruit with scale infestation. Again, in 20, it's hard for me to see the slides and what it says in there, and I don't remember it. So what I know is there is, especially in 2018 and 19, the percentage of fruit with scale was significantly less. As you can see in that bar chart, I think the numbers are 1 and 2%, where this is like intense. So if you're using mating disruption consistently, say year after year, then you would probably get that works towards lowering the populations, and when the populations are lower, insecticides work better. So California scale management recommendation, again the same type of talking points. Timing, it's important to hit this life stage that is most sensitive. Crowlers and whitecaps are the most sensitive for California red scale. Attack the first and second generation when the scale population is more uniform and before it gets to the fruit. It's easier to kill the scale that's on leaves. Aim for good coverage. That's, I know, high gallon of water, but then again we need to get to the scale. For Movento, it has translaminar activity and it works better in higher concentrations, so 250 gallons per acre for Movento. Drive slowly and avoid water stress to the trees when you can. Protect the natural enemies, which is a Phytis, from broad spectrum insecticides and from dust, cowling, and lime products that reduce the parasite activity. And combine pheromone disruption with your pest management in crops with chronic red scale problem, because it has been shown to reduce the scale populations in combination with a Phytis or insecticides. Okay, that is all the recommendations for pest, two-kip, T-pest, citrus thrips, and California red scale. I want to touch base a little bit on extension and outreach because this is one of my main responsibilities in this new role as an advisor. Again, going back to the poll questions, we asked to our 42 participants during the field event, what do they prefer for information on pest management options? And they said 70% of them said they prefer field days and workshops that talks about a specific pest. 14% of them said conference and seminar presentation. About 6% said webinar and virtual meetings. 10% of them said farm visits, and none of them were, for the social media. Okay. So, little bit bragging here. In the last 3 months that I have been in this position, we successfully organized 2 field events. The first one was in August 25, and it was very opportune because citrus thrips is getting out of hand. So we did a 2-hour field event combined with lecturing, visiting the orchards to identify different life stages and damage caused by citrus thrips. And I got a very good response, feedback, and we will probably and very likely do another Citrus Thrips Day next year, sometime in April, before the thrips season, starts. The second one was Citricola Scale Field Day, recently on September 14th of September. And we have another one coming up on California Ready Scale. It's a full day hands-on workshop where you'll be learning about all life stages of California Ready Scale, their natural enemies, how to identify them, bring fruits from your orchard and look through them, work with us under the microscope and have all the fun. You can sign up for this by calling Jasmine Del Toro at this number given here. This is the contact address for Link Cove Research Center. You also can find that information on LREC website. We have been granted 6 hours of continuing CE units for this. One caveat is we have limited seats. We can only fit 26 participants because we need to be setting up microscopes and stations in the conference room. So if you want to get in, call Jasmine. There is a $40 registration fee for this event because we'll be providing lunch and refreshments. One of the questions I keep getting asked by PCAs is, are you going to be doing the degree day monitoring and updating that information? And to that question, my answer is yes. I didn't do that this year because I was hired, into this region, and the learning curve is very steep. But next year, in 2022, my group will be doing the monitoring for degree days for Fresno, Tulare, Madera, and Kern counties, and we'll update that information at the LREC website. And I'll also be sending email blasts, hey, we saw male flight now 550 degree days later, which is probably 1.5 weeks in summer, that we need to be watching out for prowlers, and if you have this population, then make a treatment based on that. Okay, this is another thing I wanted to talk about. This is really great resource for ECP and HLB. Peg Limox, who represents the Citrus Science Health Group, asked me to talk about it. What this group does is they write research snapshots for the work that is being published for ECP management and HLB management. They have a podcast series and they do webinar presentations, and it's all available to everybody. And we are, right now it's only focused on ECP and HLB, and we are starting the talks about can we include other species in science for citrus health, because all the pest management is for better citrus health. And stay tuned for that. We might be doing some, including some other pests in this. With that, I would like to thank you all for your attention, and I would like to thank again Citrus Research Board for this opportunity to talk to you today. My contact is over there. My office is at Vinco. Drop by anytime. I would love to hear about your experiences as I develop my research and extension program. If you would like to get emails about the events that we do at Vinco, send me an email so that I can include you in my listserv, and follow me on Twitter. I started this UCANR Citrus IPM Twitter handle, and we'll be announcing about the field events and what we did in there. So thank you, everybody.
So now it's just about time for a break. Are there any questions? If you could raise your hands, we've got folks ready with microphones. We got one here in the middle.
With the resistance in pesticides for citrus thrips is an ongoing battle. Has there been any research done on thrips inhibitors? For example, kale and clay or antitransperants or some kind of thing that makes the thrips not want to go to the fruit because the fruit's been sprayed with something that would maybe slow them down a little bit and then help us to extend the time until the fruit has grown out of the susceptibility stage.
I'm not aware of the research done with lime or kaolin clay here in the valley, but there has been some studies to control ACP using the kaolin clay and other lime products. Like I said in my presentation, that has pros and cons. We might be seeing some inhibitory activities, but what that does is it's affecting our lesser enemies. Predators don't like to go on the dust-covered leaves or fruits. So again, that we haven't done that for citrus thrips, targeting citrus thrips, but our observation is predators, especially for the California red skill, which is another big problem here, we advise against it.
Thank you. My personal experience, we tried surround on young trees to help control the citrus thrips. Didn't work, so that's 2 different times we tried it, didn't work.
So I think any other questions?
Just I want to follow up on what Sylvia said. Thrips management in young orchards, if you can, thrips don't, the research that Beth did on, finding out if thrips infestation affects growth of the trees, they didn't find any differences. But if you're applying insecticides to manage thrips in young orchards, what that does is it's, putting that selection pressure on thrips, and they probably would already develop resistance before that tree even bears fruit. So again, for resistance management, it's recommended that you stay, if possible, don't spray the young orchards, especially with chemicals that have been shown to develop resistance for citrus thrips. Any more questions?
Hello? Yeah, just one more. Thanks, Sandipa. I'm a plant pathologist, and one of the things that we do a lot is we mix 2 active ingredients together to prevent resistance or to combat resistance. And I kind of see a reluctance with the entomologists to do that, and I just didn't know what the rationale was for not wanting to mix 2 active ingredients into the same spray.
The reluctance, as in my personal experience, is we don't really know how those 2 chemistries are going to react. But that being said, we will be looking, in the coming season, I will be looking at some of the tank mixes to see if we have any kind of efficacy on delicate resistant population. And if we do, then that's the route we take. But until now, just because we don't know how different chemistries are going to react in a tank mix, what we recommend is apply one insecticides and second application choose a different mode of action for resistance management. Tank mix is usually not recommended, but I would say I know very little about it, and we'll be doing some experiments in the coming years to learn more about it and see if tank mixes work.
So with that, I think if there's any other questions, we'll go ahead and save it for the break, which we have right about now. Once again, thank you to Sandipa for her presentation this morning.